years old. It worked that long. The problem is it's not being used. And I don't think it has nothing to do with being outdated. It's simply being informed.
So the next question,
and learning how to be informed. And because if you aren't informed, you're ignorant. You have no idea what's happening. And then I think if I'm correct, Nick can let me know if I'm not. Then I think then the government and corporations and whatnot would do what they want because we the people choose not to be informed.
True, and that makes a lot of sense.
To keep ourselves informed, and we choose not to speak up.
Right, and that goes back to the whole issue of education, political science in education, teaching values, teaching political activeness, and I think we would all agree, all three of us would agree that education is critically important. And the effect of education, if we educate our youth, obviously we have to wait 1 or even 2 generations for that to kick in. It's a long-term delay. And if things are changing faster than education can keep up, then we're going to see problems. And that perhaps is what we've seen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's I have to agree with that. You, Nick?
Yeah, I agree with the fact. I know I agree with it. I'm appalled by it. That's implicitly part of the. It's intrinsic to my earlier point.
Right.
With the decay of the middle class, and with the decay of the modern system of government, we've seen that the decay of our education system go right along with it, and it's made that what I would argue at some level, the deliberate dismantling of the education system in terms of funding, at the very least, has made it much easier for the status quo to continue to do what the status quo wants to do. So I think that education is a good place to start, because intrinsically, if you get an education, you most importantly, as you said, you lay a foundation. If the education is delivered in the optimal way, and we can debate and discuss, all of us have experience in education, how that can be exercised. But you begin with building a platform of education to build a sense of consciousness and perhaps morality in a society that can respond politically in a certain way that's beneficial to progress. But we don't see that today. We see a highly selfish society based on individual desires, individual maxims, not the collective. This is where modern liberals and conservatives typically diverge as to how important is the collective. What responsibility do we have to a collective? Maybe we have none, but we certainly today we look to, as a society, we seem to look to have very little responsibility to anybody else but to ourselves. So I think education is a good place to start. And if you get an education, then you begin to, if we can somehow empower our education system, it's going to require money. It's going to require finance. And if we can get it financed in some way, then we begin to change our government. Because right now it's going the other way, with schools losing financing, losing teachers, losing staff, losing technology that frankly we should have a lot more of.
Yeah, a lot of good points there.
Good point.
And,
a lot of good points.
Well, thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And Rob, if you have a sound effect for a big kiss, I'm giving Nick one right now.
No, you'll have to make that on your own, man. There you go. All right. I guess I could do a.
Kiss and make up on the radio. Huh?
How's that?
Okay, that's as nasty.
So I guess the question question I'm asking is, it is really it does lead to potentially volatile debates amongst really anybody who discusses it, because if you're right, Rob, and our conversation diverged because we were talking about two things. It's interesting what we were talking about and how those two things were different. Because if you're right, Jerry and I have a fundamental our worldview is fundamentally skewed in that way, where a lot of people do see that this system can work if it's optimized, and other people see that the system will never work as it's currently constructed, that there has to be a fundamental resurfacing of the system. So that if that is true, then the conversation, if anybody's going to have it, ultimately involves some extraordinary dismantling of the status quo. And how that's even possible, I mean, I'm not sure any of us can really talk about.
Well, you brought up...
The FBI wants to get involved, or the CIA, and they're probably listening to this conversation already anyway.
I don't think so. And even if they were, they probably have better things to do.
We're bored.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, that's ultimately what it comes down to, right? Is it either you believe in the system or you don't. If you don't believe in it, then really what you believe in is revolution, whatever that means.
And most people don't believe that.
I think
so. It depends on how you define revolution.
Well, it's a collective thing, unless it's your own personal, individual revolution.
That wouldn't be a revolution.
Right, exactly. I mean, maybe internally you could, call it a revolution, but it wouldn't be an external revolution. A revolution takes
revolt against something.
Takes cooperation, coordination, and you brought up a point, which is the increase in individualism.
Yeah,
and that's the safest countermeasure to any revolution. Satisfy the individual needs or wants, the immediate, acquiesce.
Okay, well, question. You're talking about you need to bring up the individualism, but what about groups who traditionally act as a collective?
Sorry, say that again, Jerry.
You talk about you need to bring up individualism. Then what about groups who act as a collective? Groups
who act as a collective usually have a goal or a cause or common purpose, and whether they're politically active or not, they're making a difference in their community based on their exclusivity. Are they letting people into their group, or are they excluding people from their group?
It could be both. I mean, I'm gonna talk. Okay, I could talk what I know as an African American. But we still generally do things as a collective group, based on our historical presence in this country prior to and currently in this country. We still operate as a collective because it benefits us economically and politically, versus operating as an individual. There's those of us who operate as individuals outside the group, which is perfectly all fine and good. But I think as for African Americans, I still think we still have to, if we are going to change things or want things to change, we have to do it as a it has to be a combination of individualistic and as a cooperative nature as well, in order to get something happening.
Indeed, I think those values,
and to make things change. And to get into to see change happen, within our own lives, our neighborhoods, and within the country, to see things happen. Other than that, I mean, it goes back to it goes back to having what I think I said earlier, is having information and gaining the information, because we are the government, not the people in which we represent. We are the government, and the American people. I think oppressed people see that more clearly than people who are not oppressed in this country, and that I think we have more to lose, those of us who have been oppressed over years, than those who don't, who don't have a history of that, or who came from someplace else oppressed but come here and haven't been oppressed for a generation, but yet joining the oppression of those who have. So
I think we all agree with that. And you're, in fact, an inspiration for those whose eyes are open to see it.
Well, thank you. I'm blushing. Anyway. Really not, because I don't see how what kind of light brown skinned brother can really blush, but you know.
You know, when that movement, the Occupy Wall Street movement occurred, and Nick, I think you agree with this, we felt that there was now a group we could identify with that was active and actually taking to the streets and making, I mean, they started organizing from the ground up, and you know, I haven't looked into the movement lately. I don't know what form or shape it's taken, if it's evolved, if it's still active.
I don't think it's still there, but it seems like it almost barely has a pulse.
Yeah, it's largely diminished.
Right. I mean,
it's really not full data.
I mean, it. But the thing is, something like a Wall Street can happen again.
Well, that's what it's going to take. That's exactly what I'm really. It's that sort of creativity, that sort of political inventiveness, that sort of grassroots effort. That I don't know how it cultivates itself and what the actual platform will be, but it's going to take something like that, for a global level to change the status quo, if people believe it needs to be changed. Okay, because I feel, as you mentioned earlier, Rob, that the system, is too far gone at this point.
Okay, well let's define something here. What is this in reference to this conversation?
The system.
Who is the status quo? Like, well, give examples for those who join us and wondering, okay, what the hell is the status quo?
Good question.
And who is the status quo? Who is the status quo in reference to this conversation? And how should we be aware of them? How do we become aware of them? Nick, Rob?
Especially when they don't want to be made aware.
Noticed.
Yeah. They don't want to be noticed. Okay.
Well, I think some people who would qualify as the status quo, I think you're talking about both individuals and you're talking about various collective movements, small movements of people who are trying to reach whatever goals they have. But we do see individuals in various circles of political and fiscal leverage around the world, in pattern. We see some of the same people involved in various governments around the world. But I think, to make things simple, I think the status quo refers to the political system as it is today, which, from my perspective, the status quo definition that I'm going to offer hinges upon an assumption. An assumption is that the system is in fact flawed. If the system is in fact flawed such that only a small percentage of individuals benefit from the resources of this planet, that would be the status quo. Those individuals who are inexorably and disproportionately benefiting from the resources of our planet.
Okay, so
we have about. Sorry to interrupt. We have